Hello and good day. Still, our topic for today is investment setting. This is actually the second part of our topic last time, which is investment setting. Last time, diniscuss ko yung meaning ng investment. Diniscuss ko rin yung mga different objectives of investment. Recall that the investment objectives are categorized into two. They are the basic investment objectives and secondary investment objectives. For today, we will study the different characteristics of good investment. Let us now start by discussing the characteristics of good investment. Of course, para masabi na yung investment ay good investment, dapat meron siyang taglaying attributes or characteristics. And what are these characteristics of good investment? Actually, there are 7 characteristics of good investment, and they are: first, objective fulfillment; second, safety; third, return; fourth, liquidity; fifth, hedge against inflation; sixth, concealability; and seventh, tax shield. I will discuss these different characteristics of good investment one by one. The first characteristic of good investment is objective fulfillment. An investment should fulfill the objective of the investors. Wala naman sigurong tao or individual or investor na mag-i-invest without having an objective. May mga taong nag-i-invest kasi gusto nila malaki yung return. May mga taong nag-i-invest din kasi nag-e-expect lang sila ng maliit na return. Although mababa lang yung return, at least meron pa rin silang kita. Kaysa naman nagiging idle yung kanilang resources or inactive, ini-invest nila yung kanilang resources to gain a low return. May mga investors din na nag-i-invest for growth, meaning to say, gusto nilang mag-grow as an investor. May mga investors din na nag-i-invest and after a short period of time, ibebenta na nila yung kanilang investment. There are different objectives in investing the resources. There are different objectives of investors in investing their resources. In other words, every individual has a definite objective in making an investment. When the investment objective is contrasted with the uncertainty involved with investments, the fulfillment of the objectives through the chosen investment avenue could become complex. This means that the investment objective should be in line with the investment that you have chosen. Kasi kung hindi in line yung investment objective sa pinapasok mong investment, magiging mas komplikado ang buhay ng isang investor. Kung yung objective mo as an investor is to get a high return, of course, mag-invest ka doon sa high return investments or high risk investments. At kung yung objective mo ay makakuha lang ng low return, of course, mag-invest ka doon sa low-risk investments. Always remember that your investment objective should be in line with the investment that you have chosen, or the investment objective should be in line with the investment that you will choose. The second characteristic of good investment is safety. The first and foremost concern of any ordinary investor is that his investment should be safe. That is, he should get back the principal at the end of the maturity period of the investment. Recall that an investor cannot afford to lose the principal itself. An investor can afford to lose the return, but he cannot afford to lose the principal itself. For example, yung investor, nag-invest siya ng 100,000 pesos. Ang return ay 10%. That means 10,000 kasi ang 10% ng 100,000 ay 10,000. Kahit hindi niya na makuha yung 10,000, at least maibalik lang sa kanya yung 100,000 pesos. That means kapag sinabing safety, no matter what happens, dapat intact pa rin yung principal. Kung ang investor gusto niya ng safe na investment, mag-i-invest dapat siya sa low-risk investment. There is no absolute safety in any investment, except probably with investment in government securities or such instruments where the repayment of interest and principal is guaranteed by the government. Kapag sinabing there is no absolute safety in any investment, ang ibig sabihin niyan, walang 100% na safe na investment. Actually, parang sugal ang investment. It doesn't mean na kung ikaw ang may pinakamaraming pera, ikaw na ang mananalo. But take note, meron tayong exception. At yung exception na yan ay yung investment in government securities. Because itong investment na to, this is guaranteed by the government. The government is obliged or duty-bound to pay the interest and principal. Take note, as a rule, there is no absolute safety in any investment. But there is an exception to the rule, and that is the investment in government securities. The third characteristic of good investment is return. The return on any investment is expectedly consistent with the extent of risk assumed by the investor. In other words, the return is consistent with the risk. Kung mataas ang risk, mataas ang return. Kung mababa ang risk, mababa ang return. That is the risk and return trade-off. The risk and return go together. The higher the risk, the higher the chances of getting higher return. And of course, we can say that the lower the risk, the lower the chances of getting higher return. The risk and return go together kasi kung saan papunta yung risk, doon din papunta ang return. The higher the risk, the higher the return. The lower the risk, the lower the return. An investment in a low-risk, high-safety investment, like investment in government securities, will obviously get the investor only low returns. Kung low risk yung investment, that means highly safe yung investment. Yun nga lang, kahit highly safe yung investment, ang return naman is low. Kapag high risk naman yung investment, the investment is less safe. Pero kahit less safe yon, meron namang high returns. That is basically the relationship between risk and return. The fourth characteristic of good investment is liquidity. That means the investment must be liquid. Recall that an investment is said to be liquid when it is easily converted into cash. Given a choice, investors would prefer a liquid investment than a higher return investment. Normally, ang pipiliin daw ng investor ay yung investment na liquid. That means investment na makakapagbigay sa kanya ng low return rather than a higher return investment. Sa liquid investment, ang return dito ay low. Sa higher return investment, ang risk dito ay mataas. The question is, why would an investor normally prefer a liquid investment than a higher return investment? Because the investment climate and market conditions may change, or investor may be confronted by an urgent, unforeseen commitment for which he might need funds, and if he can dispose of his investment without suffering unduly in terms of loss of returns, he would prefer the liquid investment. Obviously or evidently, ang isang reason kung bakit normally pinipili ng isang investor ang liquid investment is that the investment climate and market conditions may change. Aside from that, another reason is the necessity of funds. Kung liquid kasi yung investment, that means mako-convert siya easily into cash. At kung kailangan niya ng funds, meron siyang pangbabayad. That's why he would normally prefer a liquid investment. And it also says here that if he can dispose of his investment without suffering unduly in terms of loss of returns, he would prefer the liquid investment. Yung word na dispose here, ang ibig sabihin niyan, sell. Ibenta yung investment. That means, kung pwede niya namang ibenta yung investment niya without suffering a loss, of course, mas pipiliin niya na mag-invest na lang sa liquid investment. Those are basically the reasons why investors would normally prefer a liquid investment than a higher return investment. The fifth characteristic of good investment is hedge against inflation. Kapag sinabing inflation, this is the general rise in the price level in an economy over a period of time. And since there is a sudden rise in the price level, ang result is magde-decline yung purchasing power ng currency. There is a decline of purchasing power of a given currency over time. In other words, nagkakaroon ng inflation kung tataas yung presyo ng mga bilihin, at dahil tataas yung mga presyo ng bilihin, ang mangyayari, magde-decrease yung purchasing power over a certain period. That is the meaning of inflation. Now, the purchasing power of money deteriorates heavily in a country which is not efficient or not well endowed in relation to another country. That's why investors who save for the long term look for hedge against inflation so that their investments are not unduly eroded. Kapag sinabing hedge against inflation, we are talking about the protection against inflation. Investors must protect their investments against the decrease in purchasing power of a currency or money. The sixth characteristic of good investment is concealability. Investors would like to keep their investments confidential so that their investments made for their old age or uncertain future do not become a hunting ground for their own lives. In other words, dapat yung investment ay confidential or private. The reason why investments must be kept confidential is for security purposes. Any confidential information must be concealed. Because ang pinaka-worst kasi na pwedeng mangyari, it might risk their own lives kapag yung confidential information ay lumabas. They need to secure or keep any confidential information for their security. Again, investors must keep their investments confidential for security purposes. The last characteristic of good investment is tax shield. Investment decisions are highly influenced by the tax system in the country. For every country, there is a different tax system, or every country has its own tax system. Aside from the tax system, meron ding kanya-kanyang tax laws ang mga bansa. Iba yung tax laws dito sa Philippines at iba yung tax laws sa ibang bansa. Investors look for tax incentives while making an investment and also tax reliefs while reaping the benefit of their investments. In other words, these investors look for ways on how they can minimize their taxes. Habang pataas kasi ng pataas ang income ng investor, pataas din ng pataas ang kanilang babayaran ng tax. That's why they are looking for ways on how they can minimize their tax liabilities. Recall that tax minimization is legal. Ang illegal ay yung tax evasion. As long as nag-declare ka ng income, dineclare mo lahat ng income mo, that means there is no non-declaration of income, there is no understatement of income, and there is no overstatement of expenses. Legal yan sa mata ng batas. Sa tax minimization kasi, yung mga ginagawa ng taxpayers para ma-minimize yung kanilang tax liabilities ay legal. Yung mga ginagawa nila ay hindi contrary dun sa tax laws. That's why tax minimization is legal. If investors were to pay taxes on the income earned from investments, They look for higher return in such investments so that their after-tax income is comparable to the pre-tax equivalent level with some other income which is free of tax but is more risky. Yung tinutukoy na after-tax income dito ay yung income ng taxpayer after mabawas yung tax. This is the income after deducting the tax. At yung sinasabing pre-tax dito, ito yung income before deducting the tax. As a summary, the characteristics of good investment are objective fulfillment, safety, return, liquidity, hedge against inflation, concealability, and tax shield. And that ends the discussion in investment setting.